Welcome to The Shoreline, brought to you by Shores and Islands, Ohio, where finding your Lake Erie love is a sure thing. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Jill Bauer, PR Manager for Shores and Islands, Ohio, and please welcome back to the program my co-host for today, Assistant Marketing Director Jennifer Yoakum. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. Good morning. Hello. Good afternoon. We don't know when people are listening. They could be listening.
This is true.
So just happy day wherever you are. We bring you The Shoreline each week to give you the inside scoop on everything happening here in our island and coastal communities. And spring is finally in the air. We are, the last day of March, so it's almost April and getting into the spring months. So, Jen, what are you looking forward to as spring awakens on the North Coast?
Let's see, everybody and everything thawing out finally, yes. Including myself. I've been in a little bit of a hibernation myself, so you can get outside year-round here, obviously, but I prefer the warmer weathers myself. Yeah. I just do. I just like it better. I love that everything's going to be opening up. Islands, got to get back to Kelly's and Put-in Bay. I have an equal love for both islands, so.
Really? I always thought you were more of a Kelly's Island girl.
I end up there mostly, yes. But yes, there are just certain spots that I just absolutely love to go to on Put-in Bay.
Yeah.
Like the fire engine bar. Where else are you going to sit at a fire engine, you know?
That's a good one.
It's just fun, yeah. And people watching is just the best.
Well, you know, the ferry started running last week, I believe, for both Miller Ferry to Put-in Bay and the Kelly's Island Ferry. And I believe trips to Middle Bass start this week. So it is now possible. Well, it was always possible to get to the islands if you wanted to fly. But now the ferries are running, and that kind of brings just kind of a rebirth, an awakening, you know, all of the construction vehicles and all of the services are heading over to the islands, and you start seeing businesses open up and welcome their seasonal employees back. And so, Jen, you'll be happy to know some of the things coming up on Kelly's. We've got early bird party at the Village Pump and the spring wine fling out at the Kelly's Island Wine Company. Those are some good ones.
Yes, they are. And I'll be there for early bird.
I figured you would be. I thought you were a regular at early bird.
Yep, sure am.
Yeah, well, April's going to bring a bunch of spring events to the region. Of course, we've got a lot of Easter celebrations and egg hunts. I mean, I started to make a list to put on the podcast today of the egg hunts, and there were just too many to even mention. So check those out on our website. And, you know, with the ferries opening up, the islands are starting to open up. In addition to those Kelly's Islands event we talked about, by the end of the month, the Whiskey Light will be illuminated at Put-in Bay's Roundhouse Bar.
Kind of like the official waking up of Put-in Bay.
Right, exactly. Plus, we get to round out the month of April with some rather big events for our area. The Progressive Catawba Island Boat Show. That's the area's only in-water boat show. We'll be there. Shores and Islands, Ohio will be there with Vanna.
Oh, yes. That's always a fun show.
Our mobile kiosk, our mobile van. If you haven't seen her out and about yet, we lovingly call her Vanna. She'll be out there. I think she's also going to be at Erie Metro Park's Earth Day extravaganza. I know she was there last year. That's a big one as well out at Osborne Metro Park in Huron. And also the Vermilion in Bloom Gardeners Fair. And we had the folks from the Vermilion Chamber of Commerce on the podcast last year and got to learn a little bit about Vermilion in Bloom and how they beautify the community of Vermilion with all of their flowers and plantings. And you can make your home and garden just as beautiful by learning from them. Yeah, so it's really going to be a spectacular April here on the coast. So make sure you come and join us for all the fun. Find our full events calendar online at shoresandislands.com. And as always, make sure you're following along with our social media manager, Megan, on all of our social media channels, because she'll be putting up all of these fun events and things that you can do when you come visit us in Shores and Islands. Let's get into the fun of today's episode. If y'all are ready, on today's episode, we are both rounding out Women's History Month and our series on amazing women. Also, welcoming spring and the ability to, again, be outdoors. As Jen mentioned, everything's thawing, so we have an awesome guest today. Jamey Emmert is an Avian Education Coordinator for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife. A 2003 graduate of Hocking College with an associate's degree in wildlife management, Jamey has been with with the division since that same year. Her role encompasses a wide range of responsibilities, including managing the Lake Erie Birding Trail program, conducting educational workshops, and collaborating with other educators on conservation initiatives. Outside of work, Jamey enjoys traveling, hunting, fishing, artifact hunting, native plant gardening, and birding, of course, often alongside her husband, Greg, and their 2 canine companions. And as Jamey shares for the record, her dogs have life lists longer than most humans' lists. I love that. That sounds like that means the dogs get to go on a lot of birding trips. So welcome to the program, Jamey.
It's a privilege to be here.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. Let's start just a little bit on your background. You've been with ODNR for more than 20 years. So how does one end up in wildlife management, and how did that then translate into your current role, which is Avian Educator?
Thanks for asking that, Jill. So I grew up with a family who valued wild things. Pure and simple. We love to be outside. And before I was even old enough to walk, I rode in my dad's pack basket while he checked his trap line in Southeast Ohio. So I was just outside a lot as a child. And so I just grew up wanting to be immersed in the outdoors and work in the outdoors as much as possible. And I distinctly remember standing in the grocery line at the grocery store with my mom. I was maybe 8 or 10 years old. And of course, the obligatory question came up from a friend we ran into. And she's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, the utmost confidence, I said, I want to work outside with animals and not be around people. And I don't know where that honestly came from, but roles have, I sort of found that path. But here in Ohio especially, you guys, you cannot be so passionate about wanting to protect wildlife and not want to work with people. And I have learned to value people more than I ever thought I would. And that sounds silly because, we just have a lot of people here in Ohio, but we have a lot of wild things too. And so many of us are often in the wildlife profession. We are often attracted to being outside because we enjoy that solitude and we enjoy being immersed in nature and feeling that stress-free environment. And oftentimes that doesn't mean a lot of people. But I have come to really value how much people care and want to conserve wildlife and how important it is to build those relationships. And that's a big part of what I do today is, I spend a lot of time teaching about wildlife, but a huge component is teaching people to care and be aware about wildlife. And watching wildlife primarily is my responsibility today in this job that I'm in now, is just helping people understand the value of protecting our natural resources for now and for future generations.
Well, so your title is Avian Educator, so I would assume that means you specialize in birds. What are you educating people about, and how are you going about doing that?
Sure. So birds are everywhere. And that's one of the most beautiful things about them, is that you can be walking down a very urban street and there's birds flittering and singing. You can be immersed in a very wild place that is devoid of development as much as possible and find birds. So birds are around us all the time. Even if we don't slow down enough to notice them, they're there. And so that's the key component, is to just slow down, watch, look, and listen, and find the wildlife amongst us that's usually there. So we focus a lot, and in my position, I focus a lot on connecting people with birds because of that accessibility. You don't even have to have binoculars. You don't have to have tools to enjoy birding, but it just enhances the experience. So it's almost universal in some way, shape, or form, regardless of your age and your lifestyle and your background and your capabilities. You can listen to birds, you can watch birds, or you can feel their presence. So it's just a really accessible way to enjoy wildlife.
I've certainly learned a lot since I've come on board with Shores and Islands about birding in general. I also put Merlin Bird ID on my phone, and I'm such a nerd. I will sit in my backyard, and I'm like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. Look at that. That's in my backyard. But I think it's so cool.
It's a great tool. Yeah, from Cornell Bird Lab. They have some really neat stuff to help connect with educational opportunities, and Merlin is by far one of their best things they've ever produced. And that app to be able to listen to the birds, it's not 100% perfect, but just in the last year, it has come such a long way in its accuracy. So it's, very important tool to connecting with birding.
I just thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. What was in my backyard?
Yeah. See, and I bet you were surprised at how many species, what a diversity, and how numerous they can be, especially certain times of the year.
Exactly. Speaking of technology, you have some things developing with your office. One of the main reasons we wanted to chat with you today is because, one, we're coming to spring migration season, and our area is known for its amazing year-round birding. Also home to the biggest week in American birding, which is in early May. So, ODNR Division of Wildlife, in collaboration with Ohio Sea Grant, and I think a couple others if I'm correct, you've just released an updated edition of the Ohio Lake Erie Birding Trail Guidebook. This is providing birders with an essential resource for exploring Ohio's Lake Erie coastline and other possibilities to find all kinds of birds. Can you tell us about this book and why the update is so important?
So we're really thrilled to be able to produce this new guidebook. The Lake Erie Birding Trail program has been around for over 10 years. It was built by a colleague who has since retired and a whole team of individuals, many of whom have moved on. And so the program was just kind of sat stagnant for quite a few years. And then we were able to revisit it starting over a year ago. And we updated the guidebook. We're working on updating the website. We're adding an app through Outer Spatial, which we can dive more into in a second if we have time. But there's all these new elements. We're adding new signage to all 90 sites represented on the trail. So we have so much stuff going on. And there's even more in store if you let me just continue to talk. I could talk for days.
Oh, yeah.
Please do.
I can go on and on, but we have some really great stuff. But the guidebook is definitely the highlight of this program thus far, because we put so much blood, sweat, and tears into revising this guidebook. And if our listeners are familiar with the previous edition, it was more of a coffee table book. It was beautiful. It was really well done, but it wasn't, in my opinion, a very manageable book to take out into the field. It was kind of floppy. And so that's when we were like, you know what, we want something that you can stick in your backpack or your waist belt and be able to go out into the field and hang on to it. And it can get beat up and take all that pressure of getting stuffed in the backpack. And I think we did a good job of producing exactly what we were hoping for. So it's available through our website at Lake Erie Birding, LakeErieOhioBirding.info, in partnership, like you said, Jen, with Ohio Sea Grant, who did the printing and distribution side of things, and then Division of Wildlife spearheaded the project in its entirety.
Where will people be able to get it? Like the actual print version, if they did, other than ordering it through your site, or is it going to be available at any events or parks or anything like that?
Absolutely. So we debuted it just recently at our annual Wildlife Diversity Conference. So a little bit of a shameless plug for our listeners that if you've not heard of the Wildlife Diversity Conference, please consider attending in 2026. It's once a year, every March in Columbus, and we get over 1,000 people attending. And it's the hottest topics trending in Ohio wildlife related information. And we get speakers from all over, primarily representing Ohio. And it's just a really fun-filled day of just celebrating wildlife, especially here in the Buckeye State. And so we chose that for obvious reasons, because it's our biggest event related to wildlife of the year. We debuted the guidebook there and sold a couple hundred copies. And now we're selling them at various events like Biggest Week in collaboration with the Black Swamp Bird Observatory. And we're selling them at various gift shops and visitor centers along the Lake Erie shoreline. So if any listeners out there are interested in buying bulk supplies for your visitor center, for instance, or you have a store where you think that it could sell, please reach out to us through our website, and we will be happy to connect you with an opportunity to get bulk supplies. But individual supplies can be picked up in person at various birding related events throughout the year.
That's very cool. And so you mentioned it's more like a trail guide now. It's something that you can actually take along with you. What's the approximate size of it?
It's a small pocket size at about 12 by 15.
Nice.
So it's about half the size, not quite smaller than half the size of the old guidebook, for those of you who are familiar. And it's got heavy duty aqueous coating, so it can get beat up a little bit easier. We repaired, there was some issues with the binding and the pages falling out, because I beat the heck out of mine.
I was just going to say, now it can take a beating.
Yeah.
If you drop it in the mud or...
Exactly. You just wipe it off. It looks good as new. But there's all kinds of good information about just like there's, as you can imagine, a lot of these hot spots, like large parks, for instance, they have multiple entrances. And we don't have, because we reduced the page, we had to reduce some of the content. So we weren't able to put in all entrances, but we'll put in a main entrance, like by a visitor center where you can get more information. So there's location information, what hours they're open, what facilities, what kind of amenities are available, and then what kind of birds you're going to see there. Some things to keep in mind about what to expect from the trail systems, for instance, and then noteworthy rarities. A lot of these spots, especially in the Lake Erie Islands Loop and the Sandusky Bay Loop, which encompasses the shores and islands area, they are notable rarity locations. So if you're interested in looking for clay-colored lacans or Nelson sparrows, these are really rare and unusual sparrows that are hard to find elsewhere in the state, then you can visit some of these sites and find those rare and exciting species.
Cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, your passion certainly shows through in what you do, Jamey. It really does. And this is great. This is a wonderful project to have, and it's nice to have life breathed back into it.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that.
It's hard not to be excited.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell. It's great. I can't wait to see it. Actually, I want to pick one up, I think, for my daughter and my son-in-law, because I think they'd really get a kick out of it.
Yeah, they make great gifts. Do your Christmas and birthday shopping now.
I love it.
There you go. Obviously, you love birding. Do you have a favorite spot, or what's the most unique find to date?
Sure. So it's really hard to pick a favorite, but what really comes to mind off the top of my head is the Lake Erie Islands Loop is one that is, a little bit tricky to get to compared to the mainland sites, especially if you don't have your own boat. But, you guys talked early on about the ferry system, and if you're not interested in the ferry, there's options to charter a plane to get out to North Bass Island State Park, for instance. So that's one that if you are looking to get away from the crowds and immerse yourself in nature, this is a new spot on the trail. For our listeners who are familiar with the trail program from years ago, we replaced the Perry's Monument location with North Bass Island State Park. So Perry's Memorial Monument is still there, no worries. If you want to go see it, by all means. Everything's fine as far as I know, but it's just, to us, it wasn't as ideal a spot to go birding as North Bass Island State Park. So we swapped those out. And North Bass Island is primarily agriculture and wildlife habitat with very little development. But that's the tricky logistics side of things, is trying to get out there because there's no ferry system. So you do have to charter a plane for a few bucks or get someone to drop you off and pick you up later, but you can camp out there, no permit required, and there's plenty of public access.
I imagine that you probably are going to spot some rare birds out there as well, because there's not as much population. There's no buildings, or not none, but there's a lot fewer buildings and a lot more kind of wild nature area for them. And the islands are very popular for the birds because, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamey, but people are always, I'm always hearing that the birds don't have spatial awareness, I guess, to know how big Lake Erie is going to be. They just see a body of water and start flying. And,
right.
As they're coming across this large body of water, it's maybe a lot bigger. I mean, even humans think it's a lot bigger than it looks. And so they see land and, I need to stop and recharge and rest. And, the islands are perfect for that, as they're coming across on their, either way, on their spring or fall migration.
That's absolutely right. So a good example of a mainland site that is well known by birders around the world, and this is in the Western Lake Erie Marshes Loop. So and I keep mentioning loops, there's 7 loops across that over 312 miles of shoreline that the program covers. And the Western Lake Erie Marshes Loop is the second most western portion of the trail. And so it's home to McGee Marsh Wildlife Area, and it is a birding mecca. There's nothing that compares to McGee in so many ways, and specifically because it juts out into Lake Erie a little bit. So, for example, if the birds are coming from South America, Central America, Mexico, their wintering grounds, they're moving northward in the springtime, and they get to McGee Marsh, and I know that you guys are well aware of the storm that hit a few years ago, the tremendous windstorm, and it knocked down a ton of trees at McGee Marsh. And people were so scared of what's going to happen to the birds. Where are the birds going to go? Well, how's this going to impact migration? Well, the birds still have to move through. And they were still there. After the storm, they came through, they stopped at McGee Marsh, and they fuel their bodies so that they don't tucker out, or ideally they don't tucker out as they cross Lake Erie to get up to the boreal forests of Canada. So that's why when the winds are blowing towards from the north across the lake, there are some days that birders will refer to as fallout days. And that's when the birds continue to fly north. And this happens over the course of several days, but the winds don't allow them to make that big crossing across Lake Erie, maybe stopping at Pelee along the way and then heading into Canada to the boreal forest there. They will stack up. And those are days where you feel like you're in a Disney movie. It's ridiculous. There's so many thousands and thousands of birds, and they'll be right up in your face. The first experience I had with a warbler at McGee Marsh over 2 decades ago, there was a Blackburnian warbler with his flame orange throat just staring me dead in the face at about a foot from my nose. And this is the kind of experience at McGee. I keep talking about McGee because it's just so well known by birders around the world. But there's so many sites that can produce hundreds of species of birds, equating to thousands of individuals, all within the Lake Erie shoreline and the region that we're covering that we're talking about on this podcast, including the Lake Erie Islands. Because you're right, that this habitat is so important for them to fuel their little bodies for that trek across the lake. But not all birds migrate. We can talk more about that if there's time. But some birds will stop and nest, and this area is equally as important for them too.
Yeah, that's why we have such great birding year round. You know, there are shorebirds and things like that are here year round. Jamey, I do want to hear more about the app. You mentioned it's Outer Spatial. Is that the name of the app?
It is. Yep, that's the platform that we joined, and our sister agency to Division of Wildlife, Division of Parks and Watercraft. They're the ones who manage state parks for camping and hiking. We have an abundance of state parks across the state and several in the Shores and Islands area. And that's a sister agency to us. And they were on the app first because they have such an abundance of trail systems. So if you download Outer Spatial, it's a free app through the Play Store. You can, through Android and Apple, you can download that app and see all the trail systems that you want to visit. But then if you search Lake Erie Birding Trail, you'll see that we have added the trails there too. And we're a little bit different in the fact that when you visit a state park, there's often loop trails or out and back trails that are specifically designed for walking and hiking and wildlife watching and enjoying outdoors. Well, that's not exactly how the Lake Erie Birding Trail works. It's not so much the whole program is not a destination. There's 90 destinations across the trail, if that makes sense, stretching from the Pennsylvania border to just west of Toledo. So you go and visit each of the 90 destinations. So it's set up a little bit differently in that regard, that you'll click on it, you'll see a location like Peterson Woods and Keenly Wildlife Area, which is within the Lake Erie Islands Loop. And then that's where you'll find all the information about how to visit, what to expect, what kind of birds you might see, and so on and so forth.
That's all in the app.
It's all in the app, yeah, and it works through our website. So if you open the app, you find the Lake Erie Birding Trail, you click on a site, and then it connects you to our website for more information. And what's really great about that is that our guidebook has a lot of elements that we talked about, but the website has even more additional information that we couldn't fit into the guidebook, like natural features to explore, including other flora and fauna that you might experience along the way. Because so many of these sites, especially within the Lake Erie Islands Loop, have some of the most rare and endangered, unexpected plants that you can possibly find in the Ohio region. So if you go on our website, you can read about some of these really neat, rare botanicals and then other species besides birds that you might encounter too. So having the guidebook, the app, and the website all at your fingertips is the way to go to really immerse yourself in the Lake Erie Birding Trail program.
And it covers the entire coastline, of Ohio. So all the way from to the east of Ashtabula Loop, I think it's called. And then the far western loop is at the Oak Openings.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different loops on here, depending on where you are along the coastline. And it looks like almost, I think, 3 different loops kind of cover the Shores and Islands, Ohio area with, we've got the Huron and Lorain loop, the Lake Erie Islands loop, the Sandusky Bay loop, and the Western Lake Erie Marshes loop. All of those encompass the Shores and Islands area. And then, of course, as you go further east and west, you can continue to explore all along the coastline.
It's all broken up into 7 loops, mainly because of landscape and habitat type, but also to make it a little bit more bite-sized and manageable, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's not even because of the habitat type. So that's why if you look at Ashtabula Loop, there's only 6 sites, but then you move over to Cleveland and there's 26 sites. And that's because there's just such an abundance of birding opportunities in the Cleveland area. And there's even some sites in that are 30 minutes south of the shoreline.
You're so close.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You might as well just shoot down there and at least spend a few hours and see what it's all about, because hundreds of species of birds can be found at Cuyahoga Valley that you may not encounter elsewhere. Especially because of the forested habitat type, and then you can go back up north and continue your trek westward. So the really exciting part that we're exploring, and we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there, and Jen has helped me tremendously try to get this exploration, this adventure started, and that's a rewards system or an incentive system. So this is brand new to the Lake Erie Birding Trail. But just I would like listeners to know that as you start to experience the trail, maybe take some selfies with our signs, take pictures of the sites as you go along, document your experiences, because we are moving forward on building an incentives rewards program in the sense that we're going to have certificates for completion of a certain number of sites or loops, or hopefully if you are that adventurous, you complete the whole trail. And we're exploring swag, so some really neat stuff like stickers and patches and hats and some fun things like that to reward you for participating in the Lake Erie Birding Trail program. So we still have a little work to do on that, but just please, listeners, keep that in mind and check our website and app for updates as we move along.
That's very exciting.
It is. I saw some of the previews of the swag. It's really, really cute.
Yeah?
I would get it. Yeah, definitely.
That's what we like to hear.
Oh, yeah.
That's very exciting. And there's more, it says 90 birding trails. So each of these little spots along the coastline, 90 different places that you can visit. So you could make that your goal, that I want to visit all 90, or you can pick a region and, just pick however many you're in that area. I also like that you can narrow it down by exact location. You can choose a county, like I can just put in Erie County, for example, and it'll show me all the spots that are in Erie County. So if you're visiting one spot, it's very easy to see what else is around you, what else, is nearby. And maybe you didn't even realize that there was another great birding spot just down the road.
And there are hundreds and hundreds of places, especially within so many of these terrific park systems along the shoreline. We were just picking what we think were the most accessible, the most ideal, that feature the most diverse habitat with the most diverse checklist, which means the most diverse species list, like what a variety of birds you can see. So we had all these elements, that all this criteria we were taking into consideration when we selected these sites. But if you go on the website, if you visit a site that's in the guidebook, well, then there'll be a mention of other sites to visit. And like you said, Jill, there's other places that aren't considered our primary site. But while you're there, shoot down the road to this little city park, because it's got great access to and a view of Lake Erie. And so you can find out about additional locations. If 90 is not enough, there's so many more. So check out our website and you'll get even more ideas. But there's no timeline. We're not going to put a timeline on this rewards and incentives where you have to do, like, we might have like little challenges where you visit 3 sites in the next 3 months. But
ooh, I love that.
Yeah, so we're going to have like fun little games and stuff. But ultimately, if you want to complete the entire loop because you want to get a hold of a, really cool swag item, we're not going to say you have to do it in a certain time frame. It's when you're able to do it, because visiting 90 sites that stretch over 312 miles is a big undertaking. We realize that. So we're not going to hold you to, any particular timeline. So we just want to see people get out there and enjoy and immerse themselves in this really fun opportunity.
I think in general, people will just be surprised to learn that there are so many. I mean, 90 seems like a lot to me. Like, I know because I live in this area that, we've got a lot of great areas for birding, but I never would have thought about the Cleveland area, for instance. Like you mentioned, birds are everywhere, even in rural and exactly. urban areas, So I think for me, I'm like, oh, wow, I wouldn't even have thought of that. But if I'm headed that way and I've got an appointment downtown Cleveland or something, here are some spots I can stop on my way back and check out some amazing things.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I said that we made a few changes here and there. We swapped out Perry's Monument for North Bass Island State Park. Well, my fellow bird nerds who are listening right now will be really pleased to learn that the number one question I get about the Lake Erie Birding Trail program is why this one particular site in the western Lake Erie Marshes Loop was not on the trail for the longest time. Well, if you've ever heard of Howard Marsh Metro Park, yes. It is a supreme birding location. Yeah, hundreds of species of warblers and shorebirds and raptors and waterfowl have been reported at this really wonderful site. But years ago, it was merely a working farm and has since been turned into a public accessible Metro Park, and thanks to Metro Parks Toledo. So we were able to add that site finally to the Lake Erie Birding Trail Guidebook. And it's just, everybody is so thrilled to finally see that come to fruition. And we're adding signage too. And in fact, that's what I'll be spending tomorrow doing is running around and delivering signs to our partner organizations. All the organizations part of the birding trail, like Metro Parks Toledo, for instance. We're going to drop off signs to them, and they're kindly working with their staff to get signs installed. So when you pull into Howard Marsh Metro Park, for instance, you'll see a great big Lake Erie Birding Trail sign.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. So it has a QR code on it. You can click that QR code to be connected to our website to learn more and take a selfie with it. Because like I said, it's going to pay off if you want to get into the swag stuff.
Nice. I love that. And you're right. I mean, that's why it's so important that this has been updated because, years ago, the last time your guidebook was printed, there wasn't much there. And it has that area in particular, Howard Marsh, has really been upgraded. I mean, the trails there are very nice. I see people kayaking there and, all kinds of things that you can do at that Metro Park that I'm sure you couldn't have done 10 years ago. So sure. That's fantastic that, those places have been added. And again, having the digital component means that you can probably continue to update those things as parks come online and areas get refurbished and upgraded and more accessible to the public.
That's absolutely the plan.
I love that. So, Jamey, is there anything else that we're missing? Anything else about the project that you wanted to share with us?
Just to grab the guidebook because it's going to be such a handy item to keep in your car, keep in your backpack. It's only $15, a few bucks more for shipping if you want to buy it online. That's certainly a convenient way to do it, but we'll be selling it at Biggest Week through Black Swamp Bird Observatory, plus Friends of McGee Marsh, and a very important organization to us here at Division of Wildlife. You can visit them at the McGee Marsh Visitor Center. They'll be selling the guidebook too, so pop in there and grab a copy for everyone in your life because it will make a great gift, as we discussed. And download that app. It's totally free. And we're selling, every guidebook comes with a map of the Lake Erie birding trail. So the map breaks down the loops and specifies each and every trail. Every site identified on the trail. Plus, on the other side is the Ohio Lake Erie Birding Trail Master Checklist, which features over 400 species. I think it's close to 425 species have been documented in the state of Ohio, and it's very likely that if you hit the Lake Erie Birding Trail hard over the next year or two, that you'll encounter at least half of those species. And so, you can get the map for $3 if you want another copy of the map, but it comes with the book. So for $15, you get the guidebook and this handy map and checklist, so you can document your adventures along the way. And so we're really pleased to be able to offer that too. And by the way, I think Jill, you may have mentioned, or sorry if it was you, Jen, I can't remember now, but spring migration is absolutely the most popular time of year for birders in general. But please keep in mind that birding is great all year round, and it just
sure is.
a lot depends. Yeah, a lot depends on which site you hit, and we'll mention that in the guidebook on individual sites, saying like this is more ideal in the fall or this is more ideal in the spring. There's even sites that on the most brutal winter days, if you're willing to go out there and brave the elements and watch the lake, you'll see Jaegers, which are a type of predatory gull that are really exciting. And so you can get out there at any time of the year. Spring is the most popular because the birds are in all their glory of their breeding plumages, and there's just so many on the landscape. Fall, they're losing their breeding plumages, so they're hard to identify. But I mean, when I think of spring migration, I immediately think of May, because being a northerner too, this is when the warblers are moving through, and it's just a really exciting time of year. But you guys mentioned shorebirds and waterfowl, and they move through in March and April. Like they're hitting it hard right now, and they're migrating around the state. And then we see, fall migration kicks in July.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it's great birding all year long. So if you need more guidance, reach out to us and talk to us, and we can help you narrow down some ideas and help you build an adventure. But the guidebook is a really good way to get started.
I love that. And you mentioned the list that's on the map. Going back to your bio, you mentioned your dogs. Do you keep a separate list for your dogs?
I try to, but they don't always report what they've seen when I've got my back to them. But quite honestly, our corgi mix, she's been doing it since she was a puppy. She's been with us for 15 years. And she will be standing there and she'll look up, and I'll be watching her, and I'll look up and there's a bald eagle flying around over our heads.
You're like, thanks for pointing that out. I wasn't even looking there.
That's right. Exactly. So yeah, we take her along for several different reasons, primarily because she helps us find really good stuff.
Oh, I love that. So Jamey, tell us exactly where can people go to get the information? What is the website to learn about the how to order the guidebook and to download the app?
Sure, LakeErieOhioBirding.info, or you can find it through wildohio.gov, which may be a little bit easier to remember. That's our main website, is wildohio.gov, but the Lake Erie Birding Trail Program website is LakeErieOhioBirding.info.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you educating us on all things birds in this area and about this amazing program and the update, and hope everybody will run out and get their updated Lake Erie birding guide. Special thanks to Jamey Emmert for joining us today, and thanks to Jen as well for pitching in. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a minute of the action here in Shores and Islands, Ohio. You can also find more information, including past episodes of the podcast, online at shoresandislands.com. And we will see you next time on The Shoreline.